Pete, welcome to Speaker Spotlight.
Hello, nice to meet you, Laura.
It's great to meet you. I've heard so much about your work. Would you, in a nice way, in a really good way. So,
Yeah.
for people watching, please tell us a bit about the work that you do around dyslexia and neurodiversity awareness.
Cool. So, my specialist area is dyscalculia, the maths learning difficulty dyscalculia. And most of my work now is around supporting people in the workplace, principally with difficulties around mathematics, but across the whole range of neurodiversities. And increasingly, obviously, we recognize that there is so much overlap between dyslexia and dyscalculia and ADHD that sometimes it's very possible it's very difficult to see where the line is between those conditions. And so I sort of work with helping people to understand how they need to be supported. What support do they need to excel in the workplace?
And that's the big thing, isn't it? Because fantastically, there's so much awareness around dyslexia, especially dyscalculia, because that is so misunderstood and that lack of understanding that's there. But I think we can put ourselves in boxes, can't we? And think, oh, I'm dyslexic, I must be X, Y, and Z. Where actually, every neurodiverse person operates completely differently.
You're absolutely right. And I think we have a tendency to put ourselves in boxes that aren't always accurate. We are all individuals and we're shaped not just by the way our brain is developed, we're shaped by the environment we live in, and we're shaped by our local community. And all of those things have an impact in how we feel and how we understand ourselves. And I think it's one thing putting yourself in a box and saying, I have dyscalculia, therefore I am going to struggle with mathematics. But we also have to recognize that that's going to have an emotional impact as well. And people are going to feel um, everybody's going to handle it in a very different way. So it's
Absolutely.
really important.
And you don't have to justify how you're feeling to someone else as well, because it's big news to take in, if you get diagnosed with dyscalculia or any neurodiverse condition, because it's how it's accepting your brain operates in a slightly different way and you learn in a different way, but also it's embracing that as well and knowing how positively what can come with being neurodiverse. But that's goes to the work that you do helping people.
Yeah, and it's a large part of the work, and I think we're doing quite well in the UK in that we start to recognise that actually people who have a neurodiverse condition will have other strengths. So there might be something that impacts on your work, but actually it's your ability to communicate, it's your ability to think on your feet, to problem solve, that is more useful than the fact that you need to use a calculator when you're doing maths to check you're accurate. And I think in the UK, we're much better now at seeing these conditions not as deficits, but just as biodiversity. It's just biological diversity in the same way that our hair color is different. It's just something that is different. But there's a lot of work to do around the world in helping people to recognize that. There's a lot of work to do in some communities in the UK. Not to be constantly calling people that struggle to express themselves in writing as being lazy or stupid.
Yeah.
That's,
And it still happens, unfortunately, what we're in 2024 now, and it still happens. Like I work with a lot of workplaces, and I'm sure you hear it yourself, and it
mm,
still happens, which is really sad. But that's why your work is so important, Pete, especially because I think people think with it, because it's a learning difficulty, it's just going to affect you in a learning environment, so in university and school, but actually we're continuous learning all the time, aren't we? So in a place of work, you're gonna face challenges about the right support in place.
it is, and it is literally just about making small adjustments. The technology that is available to support most people, support can be helpful to everybody. The biggest story I hear, the most impactful story I hear amongst adults in the workplace, though, is how much work they have to put in to try and mask their difficulties because they're concerned about how they're going to be perceived. They're worried about being shamed because they've had this constant dialogue in their life that puts them on the back foot, that makes them think they're somewhat inadequate. And it's not. We need to celebrate everybody's strengths rather than you know, take a very narrow judgment on things that people find difficult, because we can resolve those.
Absolutely. And that's the side of being neurodiverse. People don't see the mental health implications, that low self-esteem and masking. Like I'm guilty, I can mask at times, and we all do it, but it's the burnout that comes with that. So if you're posting by acting neurotypical and when you come home, it impacts your personal life, it impacts your relationships because you're just absolutely exhausted when you come home.
It defines you. You know, you're defined by how you feel. And it becomes really difficult because you never quite you lose the trust in the conversations that you're having with people because you don't feel they're being honest, or you feel that you're being judged. And it's happened to me. I am a person with dyslexia, and I am a person with ADHD, and they have presented challenges. I mean, that's why I do the work I do. That's why you do the work you do.
We've unfortunately experienced it, and we don't want anyone else to face that. Sadly, it's almost like your lived experience can help people.
Well, I hope so, and I definitely reached a stage in my life where that paying it forward is really important. I mean, the reason that I do the work I do is that I went into teaching, and I heard students being talked about in the same way that I was. There was no point in putting any effort in, they're lazy. And I still hear stories in the workplace of people being treated like that, and I hear stories in schools of being treated like that. So I think one of the things that I have noticed, though, is that more people with neurodiversity are supporting people with neurodiversity. It's helping to normalize it. Um, so many people have lived experience from people in their own family or their friendship groups that have problems. So we are moving in the right direction. And we will continue to move in the right direction. And events like the Dyscalculia Show are a massive part of making the difference. But there's still a long way to go, and the infrastructure around supporting people is still weak, and that's what I do. You know, my sort of daily work through Tutorum is face-to-face work. I do quite a lot of coaching work, but also we're building IT systems that can make sure that we understand what people need. A lot of the work I do is trying to answer the question that the individual asks, what support do I need to excel? Because one of the other problems is being asked, well, okay, Lauren, so you have dyslexia. What do you need me to do? And Lauren, you don't necessarily know the answer to that because you don't know what's available.
And that's it. It's a case of exploring it and going back to what we said at the beginning of the interview. Each learner or person with neurodiversity is completely different. So it's exploring those different avenues and
Yeah.
checking in with them as well and saying, is the software working? Is this helping? Is this coloured paper working? Do we need to change it? And that we don't expect people to know everything, but the fact they're willing to learn, it is everything.
Yeah, and it is about communication. It's about not just putting somebody into a box and saying, if you're in the box, this is what you get. It's about actually having a conversation with somebody, understanding, uh, you know, where they feel they have barriers, and doing what we can to remove those barriers. It's quite simple. It's fundamental. It's enshrined in law. It's enshrined as a basic human right. You know, if there is a barrier, we have to do what we can to work around that barrier.
In the meantime, Pete, the show's not till March, but you're just a beacon of knowledge, and I think any company can benefit from speaking to you. Where can people find out more information about your services?
They're very welcome to. So the main point of contact for me in my workplace work, and I'm going to direct you to that, is an organisation called NATTC. So that's www.n-attc.co.uk. But they're also very happy. I'm very happy for people to track me down on LinkedIn. So search for Pete Jarrett, maths or dyscalculia on LinkedIn. My happy smiling face will crop up very quickly. Reach out.